female millennials who earn $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and you get about 10, 11% agreement on anything, that's a lousy ROI. That's a really big waste of money and time and effort if that's the best you can hope for using demographic profiling.
Welcome back to our Show in the House podcast, fans. We have an exciting guest that's joining us today. I'm Jenny Woon.
Tony Singh.
And we have David Allison.
Hi, David.
Hi. Thanks for having me over.
Hi, David. Thanks for coming on the show. I know that you're a super busy guy. You just posted that you've booked five speaking engagements in the United States. You're writing a book. There's lots going on in your life. So we're going to get to that. But I want to just mention how I know you. I don't know if you remember me.
Of course I do. I don't remember how we met, though.
Oh, let's hear the story.
Let's hear the story. So I'll tell the story. You're owner of Braun Allison, and you worked on one of the projects that I was selling. So I'm going to give you a hint. Let's see if you would remember. There's 32 townhomes.
Oh,
yes. There we go.
That was a long time ago. As soon as you said that, I was like, Jenny. Whoa, the block. Now I remember. Yeah, that was Jenny on the block.
Jenny from the block.
Jenny from the block. That was the whole spiel when I made my phone calls. Jenny from the block.
You know, young people won't know what we're talking about, right?
I know.
J-Lo.
Yeah.
If you're listening,
they're not even going to know what that is. So, good luck.
But that was such a fun project.
It was a groundbreaking project in many ways. That was back when Main Street and that whole part of the city was still very, it was a scary place for people to think about moving who had the money for that kind of townhome, and that they had to be real pioneers who wanted to go and try something different and not just buy in a safe neighborhood where all their friends were. They had to be willing to kind of, we want to be the ones who are a little more adventurous than the rest of our gang.
Mm-hmm. But I definitely would have to say that the masterpiece was in all the marketing and the messaging, because it was talking about, well, do you want to be in this box, this shoebox? And I remember all the photos that were coming along with the ads. You guys also did a artwork presentation along the sidewalk and did this competition with photographers. So the marketing was really edgy and thinking out of the box.
It was a lot of fun. And, I can't take credit. It was my team at the time. We had an amazing group of people who were working on that project and who worked at the company. And any success that I enjoyed was certainly part of, because I had these amazing people around me.
Yeah. So let's segue into what you're doing now, why you got out of project sales and marketing. And, I'm a very, very big fan of yours. I've read your most recent book, and I also have one of your 2011 books here as well with me. Let's talk about what you're doing now with Valuegraphics.
Sure. So, since that project, we went through a recession. And the 2008 recession. Some of your listeners probably aren't even old enough to remember that, but I remember I was on vacation in Germany, and I was on a treadmill, and I started getting phone calls from the office going, another one of our projects just went bankrupt, and another one of our projects just went bankrupt. By the time I got home from that little trip to Europe, my company, we needed to start laying people off. It was a terrible, terrible time in the industry. And then we recovered and we built it up again. And about 5 years ago, I sold the company. And, one of the things that led me to do what I do now is it exactly came from my experience on project marketing, because it was all about the way we thought we understood who consumers were, who our customers were going to be. So we'd always get a brief from the team at the development company saying, here's the demographics and the psychographics. And guess what? It was always wealthy baby boomers that we were chasing. And somebody would have written up a nice little story about Bob and Sally, who are moving from the suburbs in their pre-retirement life. And then we'd go and spend a whole lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, doing all this creative stuff, trying to attract Bob and Sally to come and buy the condos at this particular project. And then the cool thing about real estate development is about 2 years later, you get to go and see who bought. And there's a ribbon cutting and, a thing. And we kept walking into these rooms and there were no Bobs or Sallys there. We're going, who are all these people that we weren't
The data
talking
was
to,
wrong.
and why were they coming? So fast forward, we just kept doing it because it's Vancouver. And I mean, those were the boom days. You could basically scribble something on a napkin and tape it to a lamppost and people would buy it. You'd sell out in a weekend. So it was, it wasn't too hard, but we didn't really question it. But when I sold the company and decided I wanted to try and fix that problem, I had to find an answer to that solution. We started by thinking, this is about human behavior. This is about how people decide to do things. So we went and did a deep dive around human behavior science, around neurology and psychology and psychiatry and sociology. And we found the answer. The answer is that people only ever do anything because it aligns with some of their core human values. So if you're somebody who wants adventurous experiences, like perhaps the people who bought at the block, then what we were saying about the block and about that being an edgy part of town, that would resonate regardless of your demographics or your psychographics. So it's really not about these demographic ideas about boomers, Generation X, millennials. It's about what do people care about? What are their values? So if we use that as a way to understand a target audience and we talk to people based on what their values are, we're far more successful and accurate. We don't end up with that room full of people who aren't Bob and Sally. We know who's going to come. Now, once we figured that out, we said, okay, well, we need a tool. We need some way of actually looking at a target audience and saying, here's what these people care about and what makes them different than this other target audience. So fast forward to today, 5 years later.
So yeah, David, I would just to jump in, I would assume that making assumptions about how millennials think and putting this being gender bias and racial prejudice, can be quite costly.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'll give you a stat. I was about to tell you that we've now done 600,000 surveys around the world and built the world's first database of what everybody cares about. But it can also show us how similar people are when we use demographics. So, for example, if we just talk about millennials, because we've been talking about them for 25 years now, and trying to change the whole world for millennials because they're some kind of rare unicorn in the enchanted forest. And millennials around the world only agree with each other on anything 15% of the time. So no matter what you say to millennials, at best, 15% of them will respond. And men only agree with each other 11% of the time. Women only agree 10% of the time. People who earn $50,000 to $100,000 a year only agree 12.5% of the time. So all of these demographic categories, you layer them on top and go, female millennials who earn $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and you get about 10, 11% agreement on anything. That's a lousy ROI. That's a really big waste of money and time and effort if that's the best you can hope for using demographic profiling.
Right.
Now, if you understand that group of people and what they actually care about, if you know that family, environmentalism, and personal growth are the three things that motivate every decision in their lives, well, now you can get up to about a 70, 80, 90% ROI on every dollar an hour that you spend.
Wow, that is massive.
It's huge. Now, the scientists have known about this forever. We just never had a tool to profile target audiences. So that's what we built. We built the Valuegraphics Database, and now we work with the United Nations. We work with major global brands all over the world. We work with Wall Street hedge funds. Whoever comes along, we can say, for your audience, this is the stuff to focus on because this is what they care about more than anything else in their life. Pretty cool.
So yeah, you've done 600 surveys.
600,000.
600,000, sorry, 600,000 surveys. Where are they coming from?
Yeah, what's the process?
Are you the one approaching them? Like, how did you get these stats?
We work with a team of researchers from a university in New Zealand, and I've worked with them for a couple of my previous books, but this is by far the largest project we've ever done together. And they use social media as a targeting mechanism. The way you can buy ads on Facebook specifically targeted at a particular demographic, we did the same thing, but we used it as a way to invite people to participate in a survey instead of selling them something. So all around the world, using Facebook and all the various, LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and all the various social media channels that are appropriate in China and in India and everywhere else on the planet, 152 different languages altogether. And we built this database that's an accurate representation of the planet Earth. So it's the same number of men, women, rich, poor, young, old, male, female, Spanish, Lithuanian, and African as the real world has in miniature. So by doing that, and then asking them questions about what do they care about and what's the most important thing in their life, and double verifying that back against these massive statistics, we end up with this thing that's more accurate than a PhD than you need for a PhD from Harvard. And we can profile a target audience for anything, anywhere in the world. People who are going to buy these reading glasses in Argentina, what do they care about? So if you're going to make these reading glasses, you could say to yourself, well, we're going to talk about how stylish and cool these are. But what if they actually don't care about that? And what they care about instead is how much status they're going to get from this particular brand of reading glass. Well, we can tell you that now. So you're not guessing.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, it's on a larger scale, but I'm really just genuinely curious. Throughout all of these surveys and everything that you guys have done, David, was there one universal truth? Like, I know that you're looking specifically more micro, but a universal trait or something of importance that most people agree on?
Oh,
just
beautiful
curious.
question. So I'm a week away from handing in the first draft of my next book, where we talk about all the data for the whole world and how we can compare people in China to people in Africa to people in EU and North and Central America and all over the planet. So I'm in the middle right now of analyzing all the data for 9 regions of the world and comparing and contrasting what drives people and what do they care about. And there's some beautiful things that we found. One really interesting and beautiful thing is that no matter where we are on Earth, and no matter whether we're talking about B2B or B2C, real estate, Wall Street hedge funds, global humanitarian organizations, one thing that always comes to the top of a profile is what we call one of the togetherness values. More than anything, we want to be with each other somehow. Now, there's 5 different togetherness values, 5 different ways that we prefer our togetherness to come. It's family, relationships, friendships, community, and then just this one that's called belonging. So people who value belonging, they just want to know that they fit in and that they're part of what's going on. Community is pretty obvious, as is family, although we have to remember that family means different things in different parts of the world, right? In some parts of the world, here in North America, we tend to think of family as mom, dad, and the kids. In older cultures and less developed cultures, it could be mom, dads, the kids, the sisters, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, and everybody, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker who lives in their little village in northern Ethiopia. So we have to be careful about what that one means. Relationships are friendship light. So I always tell a story about the woman at the grocery store across the street from my condo who works as a cashier, and her name's Irma. And every time I go to the grocery store, I try and get an Irma's line because I know her name and she knows my name, and we tell each other a little joke about the weather. And so she's not my friend. She's not my family. She's never coming to my house for dinner. But I like Irma, and I have a relationship with Irma, and I'd miss her if she wasn't part of my day. So that's what relationships are about. So to answer your question as briefly as possible, which, as you can tell, is hard for me, the most beautiful thing we found is that everybody wants to be with each other somehow. It's why we're all having such a hard time with this pandemic. I guess the other thing that's really remarkable is there's only 56 things that drive people to do everything that they do. There's only 56 core human values. So if values drive us to do everything, all the behaviors and decisions and emotions that we ever have come from our values, that means everything that every human has ever done is because of one of, or some combination of 56 things, which means the whole world, everything around us, comes from a combination of 56 different things that are combined and recombined in different ways. It's kind of like the Human Genome Project and all the component parts to make a biological human. Well, we've done the Human Values Project, and now we know the component parts of what it means to be a human inside that biological body that the geneticists have mapped.
David, that is so fascinating. Thank
Cool?
you for sharing that. I was really curious.
Yeah.
You answered
Yeah,
that perfectly.
And on the flip side, what's the most interesting or surprising result that you've seen in the data?
It's always surprising. We have some competitors who sort of do something similar. And they have there's, one I'm thinking of, I won't say their name out loud because it's mean, but they've got like 75 categories of humans. And they're like, no matter who you are and no matter what you're doing, somehow your target audience is going to be one of these 75 groups. Well, we have potentially hundreds of thousands of different groups inside our data set. We don't pretend to know them in advance. So every time we do a project and we profile an audience, we're like, whoa, that's cool. Who are these people? Never seen them before. So it's always surprising. But I'll tell you a great story. We were working, this is a couple of years ago, we worked for a Wall Street hedge fund. And what they're trying to do is understand institutional investment people. So the guys who work at like Ontario Teachers Pension Fund, whose job is to say, you get 50 million and we'll invest 20 million here. And those guys are called placement officers. So their job is to place the funds in the right, place the investments that they're responsible for into the right funds and other possible places it could go. So everybody who's at a hedge fund or a private equity firm, they're always chasing those guys. And it's pretty hard to get their attention, as you can imagine. They got walls built of secretaries that just prevent anybody from talking to them. But we were able to profile a group of these folks for this particular hedge fund. And when we sat down and looked at it with them, one of the things that came out as being really dominant for this particular hedge fund, for their potential clients, was creativity. And for me, I was like,
that's shocking,
isn't it?
To me, I mean, it was shocking to me.
Number guys, these are number crunching spreadsheet people who have calculators in their brains and who can balance their checkbook like I've never been able to. So for me to understand that these mathematically inclined people are so driven by creativity. So I'm sharing this with the client. This is pre-COVID, back when we actually would fly somewhere and be in a room and tell people what we found. So I was on Wall Street in a boardroom, and I'm sharing this with the people from this particular hedge fund. And I was kind of expressing my surprise. I was like, wow, who would have thought? And someone in the back of the room slammed his hand down on the table and stood up and he said, how dare you?
Oh,
how dare you not think that math is creative? Math is the original form of creativity. Without mathematics, we would not have music. We would not have painting. We would not have architecture.
Point
and I was
taken.
like, we found someone right there. There's a live one. There's one of the people that we've profiled right here in the room with us today who sees their job in this world of investments and math and money as an inherently creative pursuit. So
that's amazing.
That just proved that Valuegraphics is more important than we think.
Oh, and what's beautiful about this is it's more important than demographics and psychographics. So, our world right now, our poor world on so many levels is so divisive. We're having so many fights with each other. Everything, environmentalism aside, there's all kinds of problems and tension and anxiety around us. And when you think about it, everything in our day begins with a conversation. Like, I'll go back to those reading glasses. Whoever designed these in the first place, whoever designed the next building or condo that your listeners are going to be working on, they sat down and started those conversations based on demographics.
Yeah.
Male versus female, rich versus poor, young versus old, black versus white. No wonder we live in such a divisive world. Everything begins with division.
Yes.
Instead, if we could all start thinking about, what do these people care about? What makes them human?
What motivates
what do they
them?
care about in common? I think we'd end up with a more unified world, and a world that's maybe less at war with itself all the time.
Divisional, yeah. Yeah, David, you're not saying just to stick with Valuegraphics, but this 1, 2, 3-dimensional study of demographics, psychographics, and Valuegraphics all integrate together.
Absolutely. You still need to, we'll go back to these things again. These reading glasses are probably not going to sell to 18-year-old girls who work in a grocery store because they don't need them. So you still need to know the demographics. We'll take it into your world. You're going to have a penthouse condominium on the top of a new tower. It's not going to sell to that 18-year-old grocery store clerk. We know this for a fact. Demographics are still important. But what we've been doing wrong is saying, okay, who's going to buy this penthouse? It's going to be a wealthy boomer and their wife who are downsizing from a single-family home in the suburbs. And therefore, they like marble and they want to cook and they love their
Mhm.
The
families
lifestyle
and
too.
all that stuff. But we don't know that. We're just making that up based on what we think we know about boomers and people with money. It could be that what they
Mm.
really want is bamboo floors and recycled everything, and they don't want anything that's ostentatious and over the top and looks like they're rich. They actually want stuff that makes them just look like normal folks because that's the way their values rank out. So we can't assume stuff based on what our external characteristics are. We can't say that because I can see your demographics and understand you based on these categories, that I can see inside you. We can't.
Great point.
I have a 3-part question here. So I would definitely say this is a disruptor to the norm and the convention way of studying people and how to build homes. And so there's nothing short of being innovative in this approach. So my 3-part question has to do with home builders and developers as your clients and a marketing team that's involved in marketing the project, and then also the sales team that is going to use a different approach. When they come through the door, they're not going to ask, well, how many bedrooms do you want? So I want to know how each of those teams or departments will approach it a little bit differently if they used the value graphics as part of their tool.
Yeah. So this is what's beautiful about this stuff. We've worked for a few real estate developers, and we still continue to do so with some of them. I spent so long in the industry that there's some real estate developers who I really love being around, and others not so much. So I get to be choosy now, and it's lovely. So
It's a great place to be in.
So the ones I like working with, we still do some work with these folks. So at the very beginning of a project, we can come in and say, okay, before we even have architecture, we can say the people who are attracted to this site in this city, it doesn't have to be this city, any city, and we know certain things to be true. It's close to transit, it's by a park, there's bike trails nearby. We know roughly how much it's going to cost because we know what the land cost was, and so we can kind of calculate up from there and figure out whether it's going to be a luxury building or whatever. We know how big the suites are going to be. There's enough information that we can use our database and our methodologies, and we can come back and go, the people who love this, who want to come here, this is the stuff they care about. So let's make one up. Let's say they are family, environmentalism, and personal growth. Those are 3. There's usually about 10 that they will have in common. Because remember, everybody could have 56 things. Yeah. And we all do in some order. So what our database does is tell you which ones they have in common so that you can talk to them as a group, right? So let's say it's just those 3: personal growth, environmentalism, and family. So now you can say to the architecture team, go and be amazing architects and come back and give me something that shows people how this building is going to be a kick-ass building for family, for making them into a better version of themselves and helping them with their personal growth. And we are going to put the money into environmental features on this building because we know people care about it and will pay more for it because it's one of their core values. We all know in this industry that many times it's just taken for granted and, let's do what we need to do, but do we really need to be LEED Platinum? Well, if environmentalism shows up on their profile, we absolutely need to be LEED Platinum or even Passive House if we can get to that point. So then the landscape guys, you can send them away and say, I want landscaping around here that's going to activate families and that's going to help people grow and that's going to be environmentally friendly. Don't be bringing in trees and shrubs from some exotic country. Let's use local stuff. Let's use xeriscaping. And then I can say to the interior designers, this is a family-friendly building. So what are we going to do to make sure that the walls are easy to scrub and that the floors are easy to maintain and that the kitchens are built for big family gatherings? And how about that amenity selection, folks? What are we going to put in those lobbies and common area spaces? It better be good for all ages of a family. What do the teenagers want? They want a climbing wall and some ropes instead of, a room with a billiards table. Thank God we've all stopped doing that. Remember? That was a thing for a very long time. What are we going to do? Billiards room. Like who needs a billiards room?
They just did it because it's like everybody else did it. Let's put one
Exactly.
in. But David, what you're really speaking to is value.
Yeah. Well, values.
Value graphics.
Values that it give people what they value. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the short answer to your question is if we can do this early enough, it becomes like a North Star. And all the different teams and disciplines can drive towards the same destination. We're never going to be able to tell architects how to do their job, or interior designers, or salespeople, or marketing people, or anybody. But we can say, why don't we run in that way? Let's run that direction, because that's what people care about.
That direction sometimes costs more money for the developer.
It does, but we're also limiting what we have to do. Because if we know it's personal growth, family, and environmentalism, it's not status, social standing, and ambition. So don't worry about the fancy wallpaper and the gold-plated whatever, because these are the things that people will actually react to. That stuff, maybe, maybe not. This stuff, for sure.
Right.
So we can take all that guesswork spending. We better cover our ass and spend some on this and put some of this in here and make sure. We don't need to do that. We can just take all those resources and put them on those things that we know are important.
Yeah, all this scientific data is really helpful. So at what point, let's just say they're assembling the land, are they acquiring your service at that point of as far as what they should be building on there, or maybe at the marketing point? Like
we end up getting involved at all kinds of different places. And my belief, of course, this is my baby, drinking my own bathwater. I think that you should start by understanding what for the people you're building this for, what do they care about? You shouldn't really do much until you know that. But if you've already got a building designed and it's already ready to go and it's basically just about marketing now, it's still really useful to understand what do these people care about. But I don't know why you wouldn't want to start with that. It doesn't cost any more or less to do it at the beginning than it does at the end. So bring it in early and let's all figure out how to make a building that are just going to make these people's head explode because it's so perfect for them.
I think that the best way to put it is you're going to save yourself money by not having to work backwards and tread backwards.
Or you earn more money because your target audience is, you're hitting home with them.
Yeah, you guys both know, you're old pros. You know what this is like when you get the keys to the building and the marketing doesn't match the building and it's not really what the buyers want. And you're like, oh God, how did this mess happen? What do we need to do here? It's harder. And the people who end up buying into that building, they're happy, but
they're indifferent.
Happy, right? If we could make everybody so thrilled, particularly if you think about it from a rental building, which I know is not what you guys are all about, but for somebody building a rental building, what you want, ideally, is people to move in and never leave.
Yeah.
You don't want churn. So the more thrilled you can make people moving into a rental building, the less likely they will ever leave. And your churn goes down, your wear and tear goes down, the cost to fill those suites goes down, all of the numbers move in the right direction. But the same thing holds true for purchase. Like you want to be in the building that nobody wants to leave because that's a great suite, easy to resell. If it's a building that's just like all the others with the billiards table we were laughing about before, there's a dozen of those at any given moment in time on the MLS. So it's, great place to live, but it's not going to really... It's not turning anybody's crank in any particular way.
So 10 years ago, would you have imagined that you would be choosing this specific career path?
Oh, no. I avoided data.
Do you like data though now? Or
now it's my whole wide world has opened up, and I've learned that much of the data I was presented with the more traditional research firms that we were hiring and that my clients were hiring, I didn't like it because it was pointless. And now that I can see the power of having this, let me geek out here for a moment. It's 600,000 surveys in 180 countries, 152 languages, in a random stratified, statistically representative sample of the population of planet Earth with plus or minus 3.5% level.
I think that's so cool.
Level of confidence. So we can now solve so many problems, not just for companies, but I mentioned we've been doing some work with the UN. So we're helping them figure out how to activate certain target audiences who are donating money and convince them that some of the programs that the United Nations Foundation is raising money for is the best use of those generous actions on their part. So specifically around malaria. Trying to raise money to buy nets to distribute in countries where you can still, as a kid, fall asleep at night, get bitten by a mosquito, and die from malaria. And if we give you, your family, a $5 mosquito net, you won't die from malaria. It seems insane to me that we can marshal the world's resources to find a vaccine for COVID and like that. And yet kids are still dying because of a mosquito bite and because of a $5 net that we don't have enough money to buy enough of. Some rich guy should stand up and just write a check and go, here, buy all the freaking mosquito nets you need for the whole planet and give them away. And let's get rid of that one.
Right.
Tick, we get that one off the list, right? So it's not just about how to sell better condos. It's about how to make things better all over the world. How do we get to a better place in a better way on all the things that we have to do? And if we can do it based on what people care about, we're going to do it in a way that's just far more effective and leads us to a better place.
Going back to real estate, where do you see it going in terms of utilizing Valuegraphics Database? And if every developer, I would imagine it comes with a cost, obviously. It's not going to be cheap to buy the reports and data from you. If every developer was to utilize your service and information, how do you see real estate going? Like in terms of the build, livability, communities?
I think we end up building buildings that people fall in love with. I think we end up building buildings that last longer because people have fallen in love with them. I think that's got to have a contribution to environmentalism because buildings aren't being discarded and redone and revamped and rebuilt and renovated as many times as they are perhaps right now. I heard a stat years ago that we tend to build buildings and knock them down on average around the world in about 20 years. Roughly 20 years, buildings get knocked down and thrown into a landfill. No, that's all kinds of buildings, not just skyscrapers, obviously, but the lifespan of a building is about 20 years. Now, what if we could make that 25 years just by making buildings a little bit more lovable? That'd be a good thing. It's not going to solve all the problems of the world, but it would nudge everything in the right direction. And if everything becomes a little easier to sell, and a little faster to sell, with a little bit less anxiety, we did a study for the Urban Development Institute at one point for a keynote I gave there about the values, the motivating values for NIMBYs versus YIMBYs, so that I hope, some of those confrontational community engagement processes, people were able to understand, what do these people actually care about? That's why I know what they're saying. But what do they care about? And what do these people care about? And I can hear what they're saying. And we found some places where they overlap. And we were able to share with the people in that room and say, listen, next time you go into one of these confrontational community engagement processes, this is the stuff they have in common. Start there. Those will be the easiest places to get a yes. And then from there, move into the more contentious stuff. But if you can get everybody in the room kind of nodding and going, yeah, okay, well, you got me there. That's all right. Instead of coming in there loaded and ready to just start punching each other, I think even just the reduction in stress and strife and anxiety and that period of time that the poor developers have to wait until they can finally do something because those processes take for years and years and years. You got scared politicians in the back room who don't want to do anything because, 6 people got a Facebook group going and got a whole bunch of protests. If we could just start to just turn the volume down on that a little bit by understanding what people care about, things would get better. So it's not going to change pricing. It's not going to chase supply and demand. It's not going to do any of those things. But in our own little way, I like to think that Valuegraphics would help the real estate development community and just cities in general be happier, healthier places.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah. What's last question? I know you have to get going, but what are some exciting new projects you're working on? And I want you to maybe talk about your book that you've handed in on your first draft. Are we allowed to kind of know what the topic is about?
I mean, the book is very similar to the last one. Last book was all about Canada and the United States. That's all the data we had. This one is about...
Congratulations on making it a bestseller.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun to be a bestseller. That was cool. And so the new book is about very much the same thing, but we've got data for the whole world now. So we can compare and contrast different people from different parts of the world. There's a quiz in there that will allow people to do a sort of back of a napkin sketch version of Valuegraphics profiling on their own. Packed with good information on hopefully how how can I tell you this without sounding like a jerk? There's 3 million organizations in the world, 3 million companies in the world. Kind of cool number. And each
Large number.
and each one of those companies, big and small, they have a target audience of people. And if we can get a small number of those people, of those companies, to start looking at their target audiences with a values-driven perspective, through a values-based lens, and stop thinking about these divisive, harmful, hurtful demographic stereotypes from days gone by, I think that using the corporate structures that are out there to make this message grow in a faster way, instead of it one person at a time, if we think about it one corporation at a time, and then each corporation's talking to their target audience, which could be hundreds or even millions of people, that gradually the whole notion of using values to understand each other is way better than these antique systems from olden days that just don't make sense anymore. I mean, who acts their age anymore anyway? Right? I mean, why does that got anything to do with anything? Why do we think that just because you have had X number of birthdays, you're going to be the same as everybody else who's had the same number of birthdays? It just makes no sense. But we do it. We sit in our boardrooms and go, we're targeting 55-year-olds. It's like, boys, well, target people who wear size 7 shoes. Like, sure, go for it. That makes just as much sense. Geminis. Let's target Geminis. That's the way we should be doing things. That's the demographics are basically, a boardroom horoscope reading. I mean, that's what we're doing. We may as well just be,
Yeah, it's the old school way of interviewing people.
It's a ridiculous thing.
David Allison. Are you Dr. David Allison? I think you should just put a doctor before your first name. Your passion, obsession you bring to the study of like consumer behavior is honestly very, very contagious. And I really thank you for everything that you're doing and opening up our eyes to a whole different way of marketing to our consumers and the journey that we will be alongside them. I think will connect more with our clients and consumers.
I think it's more than that too. I think it's more than that. I think you're out to accomplish something big for the world, which is important.
Yeah.
So not just about marketing and real estate and all these things. I loved the universal togetherness part that you had mentioned about the data. So I look forward to reading your new book when it comes out.
Thank you very much. I'll come back and we'll talk about it some more when we can actually hold one up, and maybe we'll give some copies away or something.
That would
Absolutely.
be amazing.
Thanks, David.
Thank you,
we would love to have a
David.
part 2 if you can come.
You invite me, I'll come back. Okay.
All right. Thanks, David.